Before we have a look at irregular verbs, let's have a recap on the present tense of regular verbs. Remember that there are 3 types of regular verbs in French, and they show as infinitives ending in er, like danser, or ir, like finir, arrer, like vendre. Then you need to knock off the mark of the infinitive and add the endings for each of the pronouns. So for er verbs, it goes like this. For ir verbs, it goes like this. And for arrer verbs, it goes like this. So to recap, to form the present tense of regular verbs, you need to add the endings of the present tense to the stem of the verb. So I remind you that the stem is what is left of the verb after you remove the er, the ir, or the array of the infinitive, and then you add the endings as such. What we call an irregular verb is a verb that does not follow the normal pattern of the present tense. It has its own pattern. There are verbs that I've already covered in my courses, and these are être, avoir, aller, vouloir, pouvoir, devoir, savoir. If you look at the English translation, you see that in English they are very commonly used. This is why in French they are also going to be very commonly used. And this is why it's so important to learn their specific pattern. So in this lesson, we're going to repeat some of these verbs. There are quite a few, so it might feel a bit long, so you might want to pause the video and maybe have a look at a verb or a couple of verbs at a time, or you might want to watch this video several times. I would advise you though to have a look or to do the little practice task at the end, and also to make note of the memorizing tips at the end. Also, don't forget that on my website you have the handout for this lesson available, where you will have the list of verbs that you can practice from. Dire. Je dis, tu dis, il dit, elle dit, on dit, nous disons, vous dites, ils disent, elles disent. You also have verbs derived from the verb dire, like prédire, médire, interdire, contredire. Now there's a little exception with these verbs, is that for the vous form, and instead of prédite, like it should be, it becomes prédisez, médisez, interdisez, contredisez. Faire. Je fais, tu fais, il fait, elle fait, on fait, nous faisons. Now let's pause a little bit on this one, because the AI in French is pronounced e, but you notice that for this one the pronunciation is e. Nous faisons, not nous faisons. And we carry on. Vous faites, ils font, elles font. Voir. Je vois, tu vois, il voit, elle voit, on voit, nous voyons, vous voyez, il voit, elle voit. Prendre. Je prends, tu prends, il prend, elle prend, on prend, nous prenons, vous prenez, ils prennent, elles prennent. And then you have verbs derived from the verb prendre, apprendre, comprendre, entreprendre, reprendre, surprendre. Mettre. Je mets, tu mets, il met, elle met, on met, nous mettons, vous mettez, ils mettent, elles mettent. Verbs derived from the verb mettre, admettre, commettre, compromettre, permettre, promettre, remettre, soumettre, transmettre. Tenir. Je tiens, tu tiens, il tient, elle tient, on tient, nous tenons, vous tenez, ils tiennent, elles tiennent. and for verbs derived from the verb tenir, abstenir, appartenir, contenir, détenir, entretenir, maintenir, obtenir, retenir, soutenir. Venir. Je viens, tu viens, il vient, elle vient, on vient, nous venons, vous venez, ils viennent, elles viennent. And for verbs derived from the verb venir, advenir, circonvenir, convenir, devenir, intervenir, parvenir, prévenir, souvenir, subvenir, survenir. Manger. Je mange, tu manges, il mange, elle mange, on mange, nous mangeons, vous mangez, il mange, elle mange. Now, verbs ending in GER are mainly regular except for the new form where we have an extra E. And we have an extra E for the pronunciation so that we can make the G sounds like a J, not like a G. Because if we left the E out, we would say nous mangeons. Therefore, we have to add the extra E. There are plenty of verbs ending in GER that are going to work exactly the same way as manger. And here they are: bouger, changer, corriger, décourager, déménager, déranger, diriger, encourager, engager, exiger, juger, loger, mélanger, nager, obliger, partager, rédiger, voyager. Lancer. Je lance, tu lances, il lance, elle lance, on lance, nous lançons, vous lancez, il lance, elle lance. Again, the verb lancer is mainly regular except for the new form where we have a C with a little hook, which is called a CD, and what it does, it turns the K sound into a S sound. So instead of nous lançons, we are going to be able to say nous lançons, which matches the other forms. And for the derived verbs, we have annoncer, avancer, commencer, dénoncer, divorcer, effacer, menacer, placer, prononcer, remplacer, renoncer. Acheter. J'achète, tu achètes, il achète, elle achète, on achète, nous achetons, vous achetez, ils achètent, elles achètent. The thing that is irregular in this verb is that the E, the first E of the infinitive, acheter, is pronounced E, and in the highlighted forms in red, it turns into E. So we're not going to say j'achète, we're going to say j'achète. And there are verbs that work the same way, where the letter in bold is going to turn into that E sound with the E with the accent. So we have amener, enlever, espérer, geler, lever, posséder, préférer, se promener, répéter, suggérer. Payer. Je paie, tu paies, il paie, elle paie, on paie, nous payons, vous payez, il paie, elle paie. And for similar verbs, aboyer, balayer, effrayer, ennuyer, envoyer, essayer, essuyer, nettoyer, renvoyer. Appeler. J'appelle, tu appelles, il appelle, elle appelle, on appelle, nous appelons, vous appelez, ils appellent, elles appellent. With this verb, the nous and the vous form are regular, but we notice that for the other forms we've got an extra L. What happens is that the letter or the consonant that's just before the ER of the infinitive, this letter is doubled. So instead of saying j'appelle, we are going to say j'appelle. It calls for a sound. The same works for these verbs: épeler, étinceler, feuilleter, where the T is going to be doubled. So if I take the first person singular, I'm not going to say je feuillette, we're going to say je feuillette with a double T. And then jeter works the same way, and renouveler works the same as appeler. Now for a little practice task, a little quiz. You're going to have some questions and you simply need to provide the answer from what we've seen previously in this lesson. Numéro 1. The vous form of the verb dire is vous dites. Numéro 2. The translation of they do is ils font. Numéro 3. The translation of I see is je vois. Numéro 4. Which letter is the letter D replaced with in the plural forms of the verb prendre? You're not going to have the D of prendre. There's another letter which is N. And even double N with they. Numéro 5. What disappears in the singular forms of the verb maîtres? One of the T's. Numéro 6. The translation of I hold is je tiens. Numéro 7. In the new form, what should you add before the ONS with verbs ending in GER and E? Numéro 8. Except for the nu and the vu form, what happens to the E of acheter? It becomes est. Numéro 9. What is the new form of the verb lancer? Nous lançons with a CD, which is this little c with a hook. Numéro 10. Except for the nu and vu form, what letter should be doubled in the verb appeler? The L. There are a number of things you can do that might help you memorizing irregular verbs. The first tip is to learn one verb at a time, because trying to learn 10 or 15 in one go just doesn't work. The second thing you can do is to listen and repeat to the verb that you're learning, because hearing then saying really helps with memorization. The next tip is to revisit your learning. So learn one verb, leave it for one day or two, and then come back to it. Learn with the pronouns. It's very important because, in fact, any verb form is always going to be given to you in that order, the order of the pronouns. The next tip is to try to write verbs down. It helps for some people, not others, but it might be a tip that you might find useful. And then finally, try to remember what makes a verb irregular, and this is the irregular pattern that you will need to remember as opposed to the whole verb. My last tip is to be patient and be kind to yourself. Don't be disheartened, you will get there. Félicitations, you've completed lesson 9. As usual, I've left a few tasks for you to practice, and in the meantime, all I have to say is au revoir et à bientôt for the last lesson of the course, lesson number 10.